neurotransmitters in your body is acetylcholine. It allows you to remember things, it allows you to move. It makes your muscles react by opening the sodium and the calcium channels in the muscle fibers, and that's what makes your muscles move. The ionic change allows the muscles to contract. I was lifting on Friday. And I was thinking about all this stuff. The point where the muscle fiber and the nerve structure communicates is the neuromuscular junction. The neuromuscular junctions are large and they're very effective, and that's one of the ways that you can lift when you're lifting a barbell or whatever you're lifting, a dumbbell. And that's what the neuromuscular junction looks like. As you can see, it's relatively large, and it will tell a large area of muscle fiber to contract. And that's the way that you can grab a hold of a dumbbell and do a bicep curl. Your neuromuscular junctions are telling your bicep, which is a set of two muscles, to pull the bar up. And of course, as you're letting it down, your tricep is controlling your arm. That's why it doesn't just drop down, because you've got two synergistic muscle groups. You got your biceps and you got your triceps. Each neuromuscular junction releases enough acetylcholine to not only cause one reaction, but several at the same time. One cause of muscle fatigue is due to diminished effectiveness of the neuromuscular junction. And normally when you lift, if you're lifting correctly, of course, normally when you lift to the point of fatigue. So if you're doing a set of bicep curls, you lift until you can't lift anymore. And what you have done is that you have diminished your neuromuscular junctions aren't working anymore. Now normally at that point somebody's yelling at you, one more, one more, one more. So you get the noodle muscles and go ahead and lift it. Muscles develop coordination when axon terminals migrate to the specific target muscles, and acetylcholine receptors migrate to the clustered axon tips, allowing for more efficient muscle reaction. And of course, that's what we're dealing with.
So, like these supplements and stuff, what do they do as far with that?
What they do is they allow your muscles to heal faster. Creatine, if you use a protein powder, if you use steroids. What they do is they allow your muscles to heal faster. When you break down muscle, when you lift weights or do something strenuous, you're breaking down all your muscles. You're breaking down your muscles. So you're damaging your muscles, you're tearing your muscles. That's one of the reasons why if you lift today, you can't lift until Wednesday or Thursday. Because you've torn all those, you've torn those muscles and they need to repair themselves. That's how you get larger and larger muscles. So if you use steroids allows you to heal much more rapidly so that you can lift every day. That's why muscle heads, the guys that actually take the steroids, that's why they really screw things up.
Yeah, I had a science teacher. He used to lift weights, and he's just gone.
Yeah.
I mean, like his head like goes like this.
Yeah.
He was on TV, everything. Like he was in like 2 things below Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like he actually met him.
Right.
Back when Arnold used to just live.
Sure.
Yeah, he was just, the steroids just totally just jacked them up.
Muscle heads. Yeah, normally they die of kidney disease or liver disease. Steroids are really hard on your liver. They're also hard on your kidneys. One of the problems people have when they use steroids is that they build their muscles to the point that their bones and their tendons can't handle the muscle mass. So here they are, they're lifting 300-400 pounds, And, you know, a body like mine shouldn't be able to do that. So what happens is I tear the tendons away from my bones. So then it needs to be repaired, and it takes 6 or 8 months for that to repair itself. I had a friend who was a bodybuilder. All of his life he was a bodybuilder. And he was in the gym. He was gay, so he liked to show off for the young kids. And they challenged him to a max out on the bench press. And he was benching, and he was on steroids, lifted a little bit more than he needed to, and he tore his bicep and his tricep. I had another friend that was lifting in the same way, and he tore his pec. He tore his pec away from his chest. Yeah, but it's the problem is that your muscles become stronger than your bones can maintain, and that's what happens. Anyway, yeah, it's pretty ugly. Muscles react because spinal or cranial nerves send messages to the muscles through efferent neurons. Motor cells of the spinal cord are larger and faster than other motor neurons, and this is one of the reasons why you can react almost instantaneously to something. Generally, small motor neurons activate slow muscles and are more easily excited. Large motor neurons tend to activate large muscles which require more stimulation for activation. So when you're starting to lift, if there was an emergency, you could get your arm out of the way, but you couldn't lift large weights. In order to lift large weights, it takes much more stimulation to activate your muscles. So if I needed to get out of the way of something, and this has happened to me a couple times, where was I? I was, well, anyway, there was a dump truck, and it was dumping, and it was on a hill, and the dump truck started flipping over because he was on a hill and he was tilted backwards, and he had his thing was going backwards. So the truck started to come over, and I just kind of stepped out of the way because I knew I thought I knew where it was going to go. And of course, everybody else is just scrambling out of the way. I'm just kind of standing there, and it missed me by about this much, which was not that big a deal as far as I was concerned because I knew where it was going to land. And I didn't get excited. Everybody else kind of got excited. No, things have hit closer than that.
Pretty cool under pressure.
You know, you work in the emergency room, you get used to that kind of stuff.
And you have to be calm.
Well, yeah, you have to, yeah. You have to be able to deal with things. Anyway. The body must maintain control over the position of its parts. This knowledge of the position and state of its muscles and limbs are called proprioception. This knowledge is maintained by select receptors that report muscle and joint positioning. Muscle spindles lie parallel to muscle fibers. Your muscles need to know where they are at all times. When you're lifting weights, of course, you need to know where your arms are. You need to know what you're doing. And that's known as proprioception. The Golgi tendon organs report on the position of the joints, and are situated with one end attached to the tendon and one end attached to the muscles. I think I've complained about my wife's pianos before. Pianos are heavy. They weigh thousands of pounds. It's stupid to even move the damn things. But of course, every time we move, of course, being in the military, you move every 2 or 3 years. And every time we moved, I had to move the damn piano, one or another. I mean, and she always had a piano, and it always weighed a ton. My son was pretty good at it because he works on his biceps. I work on my triceps, but he works on his biceps, so he can pretty much just muscle that thing wherever he wants to. But me, of course, I get muscle fatigue fairly quickly. I don't really work on my biceps. And I'll tell you, moving that damn piano, you need to know where your muscles are. You need to know exactly where you are because you can set the damn piano down on your foot. So you have to be really, really careful. Anyway, so you have to know where everything is. Muscle spindles are located in many areas of our skeletal muscular fiber. Muscle spindles are actually spindle-shaped, hence the name. They consist of an afferent element and an efferent element. Their primary function, of course, is to maintain your posture and to tell you when you have been in a position too long. One of the things about lecturing is that I lecture standing up. Some people lecture sitting down, but I can't sit down while I'm lecturing. If I stand in one position for too long, my back gets tired, my back gets sore. So usually when I go back to my office after lecturing for 2 classes, my back's pretty sore. The problem is, of course, I don't move around enough. You need to move around in order to keep your back, because otherwise your back's in the same position all the time. So you need to kind of move yourself around. The of course, muscle spindles will tell you if you tried to do something for too long. I don't know if you've ever had to hang off of anything. A couple times when I was in a helicopter, we got to the point where we were hanging from the helicopter.
Yeah, I'm airsoft qualified too.
I don't know why they do that. Yeah. And you can't let go because then you're going to be falling. Anyway. But your muscles tell you, your muscle spindles are telling you where your arm is. You can, normally when you're hanging from something, you've got your muscles tightened up and then you kind of release it after you get too fatigued. You can't control it with your bicep anymore, so now you're literally hanging from your hand with a loose elbow. I don't know if I hope you've never been in that situation. I've been in that situation a couple times. You can't pull yourself up. I mean, you got no arm strength. Your biceps are gone. So this is something that I work on when I lift weights. Is I want to make sure that I can lift myself if I need to. If I'm going hand over hand somewhere, I need to be able to make sure that I can propel myself. It's not easy, of course. I mean, it's not easy. I was just thinking while I was walking across the snow, I got feet like snowshoes. I have size 12 feet, a 5'6" body. So I wasn't worried about slipping and sliding because my feet are so big. When a muscle fiber is activated, the muscle spindle reports rate of change. Rate of change refers to change the fiber has gone through to be able to function. The muscle spindle also reports how much force you have been utilizing. The force required to maintain contraction is known as the force. What an ugly hat. Muscle spindles have 2 types of receptor endings. Primary sensory endings wrapped around the middle of the fiber are activated during the initial phase of contraction and then adapt to a lower discharge rate. Secondary sensory endings found near the smaller ends of the fiber are not activated at first, but only after prolonged use, and that's what tells you your muscle's not going to hold out very much longer. That's happened to me a couple times, trying to hold on. But I did hold on, so obviously I did. I'm still here. I hope you've never been through that. That's one of the reasons why you wrap things around your wrist. You don't just grab it, you grab it and then you wrap it around your wrist so that you get a little bit extra. Muscle spindles are informed of impending action through the special motor neurons. The gamma motor neurons or the gamma afferents inform or change of position from the initial movement. Of course, this is what you need to know when you're dealing with weight. If the weight shifts, then potentially what can happen is you can tear a muscle away. You can really damage your muscles. So your gamma motor neurons are telling you when there is a change of position. The gamma motor neurons comprise about 30% of the efferent fibers. Alpha motor neurons perform initial movement. That's about 70% of the efferent fibers. And this is what I was talking about when I was talking about hanging, unfortunately. Initially, you've got, this is going to last for, I don't know, it all depends on which muscle mass you're looking at. But it's going to last for less than a minute, 20, 30 seconds. And then it's going to go to your gamma motor neurons to hold on the rest of the way. And that's what I was talking about. You're hanging from something and you're trying to use your bicep to maintain yourself, and then after about 20 or 30 seconds, you can't do it anymore. This is one of the reasons why when you're watching a movie and the guy's hanging from something, you're going, no, that can't be. He's been hanging there for 3 minutes. That's not going to happen. Because you can only maintain your muscles, your contraction for a relatively short period of time, and this is the reason why. Only about 70% of your motor neurons are alpha motor neurons, and that's the initial movement, and then that gives out, and you go to the gamma motor neurons. And of course, you start swearing. That helps. That always helps.
You got me through my 10 years.
I know, me too. While individual muscle movement is monitored by the muscle spindles, muscle contraction is monitored by Golgi tendon organs. Golgi tendon organs are able to monitor muscle and joint movement because joint movement is controlled by tendons connected to muscles. And that's what a Golgi tendon looks like. This is what malfunctions in the individuals taking steroids. I lifted on, when did I lift? On Friday. Pretty sore on Saturday. But I'm okay now. My muscles are okay. My shoulders are sore. But if I tried to lift more weight than I should, of course at my age I shouldn't be trying to max out on anything. But I can lift the same amount of weight that I've been lifting over the last 15 or 20 years. I haven't changed much. Every once in a while I'll jump up and then my muscles will get sore and I go, well, that was the dumbest thing in the world. And now I'm going to be non-functional for about a week if I don't injure myself. Golgi tendon organs are somewhat insensitive to passive muscle stretching because they are connected to the elastic component of the tendon, and it is only activated under very heavy loads. That's the piano I was talking about. Or my muscle mass. One of the lifts that I do is I weigh right around 100, somewhere between 180 and 185 pounds. So what I'll do is I'll lift 200 pounds. I'll try to control 200 pounds. I pull it down, and then I kind of pump it up and down. But it's 200 pounds, it's pretty hard to do. But that allows me, that tells me that if I'm ever in a situation, I was on top of a mountain in Peru. I was on top of a mountain in Peru. We're way up, like, I don't know, about 10 or 15,000 feet. And I had to sit backwards and propel myself up so that I could secure a position. Anyway, I was able to do that. Other individuals, they just couldn't do it because they couldn't even lift their own body weight. And I just wanted to make sure that I could do that. I do push-ups all the time just to make sure I can lift my own body weight. If you ever get into a strange situation where you need to pull yourself away from something, I want to be able to
I don't know, man. I gained a lot of weight. I'm pushing like 223, 225.
Okay, yeah, you got big arms, you can handle it.
Yeah, well,
And if you ever got in that situation because of your training, you would just automatically do it anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's up here, there's, you know, you've got muscle memory.
It's automatic.
Yeah, exactly, it's automatic, you wouldn't have any worries as far as that's concerned. I haven't been through the same stuff that you've been through, so I just need to know that I have the ability to do that. To pull myself up on a rope, you know, that kind of stuff. I just need to know that I can do it. The Golgi tendon organs detect overloads that threaten to tear muscles and tendons, and that is the Golgi tendon's job, is to tell you you're trying to lift too much weight. Where was I? I was at Fort Belknap. Good friend of mine, he was moving a stage, and the damn thing must have weighed, I don't know, 500 or 600 pounds, and it was one of those structures that was just awkward. I mean, it was really awkward. It wasn't so hard for him because he was about a foot taller than I was. Is that right? No, he wasn't that tall. He was about 6 inches taller than I was. So it was a little bit easier for him. He also weighed a lot more than I do. And here he wanted me to help him move this thing that became the stage. It was one of the sections of the stage. And he picked it up without any problem, but then again, he had different leverage than I did, and I tried to pick up the other end. I couldn't do it, and I told him, you know, I can't do this. This is too much for me. My Golgi tendon organs were telling me that if I tried to move this about 100 feet, then potentially either I was going to drop it, or I was going to injure myself. So I just told him that I couldn't do it. And he went out and got 2 other guys, and he moved it without any trouble. But I'm not a very tall person, and of course that has to do with leverage. Anyway, I would have damaged myself. Activating the Golgi tendon organs inhibits the motor neurons supplying the muscles that pull on the tendon, and thus, by relaxing the tension, prevents mechanical damage, and that's what the Golgi tendon organs are.
Where'd the name come from?
I'm sorry.
Where did the name come from?
The name? Golgi? It's a guy named Golgi. Golgi. Yeah, since it's a person, you always have since it's a person, it's always capitalized. There are 2 reflexes that are maintained by the spinal cord that are automatic and are not mediated by the brain. The flexion reflex is activated when pain is applied to the leg. The muscles will contract, moving the affected part away from the stimulus. And there you go. In the knee-jerk response, the quadricep muscle that is contracted to allow the knee to bend is informed by the tendon pressure that makes the muscle react by stretching. Thus, the stretch reflex, and this is one of the things they will test to see if your reflexes are okay. He'll tap this tendon and your foot will kick out. And if there's a problem with your reflexes, then of course that won't happen. They can tap on your tendon all day long and nothing will happen. The primary lateral cortex, the M1, controls all the muscle movement in the body, and as you can see, it's just this little sliver of brain right on the top of your brain. That's one of the reasons why if you get that portion damaged, you may have a problem moving. And this is one of the things we have to check when somebody has a concussion or somebody has a head injury. One of the things we need the individual to do is to move. We need to talk to them, and the reason we do is because one of the largest areas of this motor neuron, the M1 area, is your lips. So what we'll try to get them to do is talk. And if they can talk and make sense without slurring their words, then we know that there's no damage done to that area of your body.
Do people who have strokes, they get damage to it?
Normally it's not here. Normally the stroke affects another portion of your brain. It's usually over here, so the hearing and the speech portion can be damaged.
Sometimes their face will be like...
Right, half of it will be paralyzed, and that's because the stroke has been on either the left hemisphere or the right hemisphere. The left hemisphere controls the right side of your body, the left hemisphere, or the right hemisphere controls the left part of your portion of your body. So if you have a stroke on the right side, then a lot of times your left side is paralyzed. And that's the way it works. The hands and the lips utilize the biggest portion of the area compared to the percentage of the body that they represent. And this is the reason we try to get you to talk. The other thing we could get you to do would be to make finger gestures. Can you hold up 2 fingers, that kind of a thing. If you can do that, then potentially that portion of your brain is not damaged. This is something that we do whenever somebody gets hit. This is part of the concussion protocol. When somebody gets hit, we have them talk, we have them listen. Sometimes words don't make any sense to them. The M1 communicates with the rest of the body through the pyramidal system. The pyramidal system is a triangular shaped bundle of nerves that runs from the brain through the medulla and into the spinal cord. Lesions to this system will result in the inability to move select joints and limbs. And of course, people do get abscesses from time to time. It can be a viral infection or a bacterial infection. Sometimes it has to do with drugs, unfortunately. So the individual will lose movement in select areas. As tragic as all that is. These neurons that run from the M1 to the muscles are not in the pyramidal system, are said to be in the extrapyramidal system. These neurons control the spinal reflexes, and of course, if something happens to a select portion of your body, you can move it automatically without even thinking about it. And that's because that is a spinal reflex. The extrapyramidal system communicates with the spinal cord through 2 tracts, the reticulospinal tract and the rubrospinal tract. The extrapyramidal system not only handles spinal reflexes, but muscles responsible for breathing and muscles that control the head and the neck. And that is it, isn't it? Yeah, that's it. Okay, and that's all we have to say about the muscles. As much fun as that is. There we go. And move the number, I think that's chapter 10.
11.
11, thank you. Let's go to something more fun. Talk about sex. Yeah, let's talk about sex. This chapter is called Evolutionary, Hormonal, and Neural Basis of Sex. Why do we do it? As you can see, we have all the balloons celebrating whatever. There are 4 stages of reproductive behavior. This is for any creature. I was watching a I was watching 60 Minutes last night. They were talking about pandas. Panda is a national animal of China, and also they were down to about 1,200 of them. They live way up in the mountains. They eat bamboo, but bamboo doesn't have very many nutrients in it. So in order for them to survive, they have to eat at least 40 pounds of bamboo every day. Now the problem was that there were farmers that were coming in and cutting down all the bamboo. So they were losing their habitat. They also have a problem with reproduction. Pandas do. Female panda bears will only come in estrus about 3 days every year. They usually have a set of twins when they give birth, if they ever reproduce. The other problem is, of course, since they eat such non-nutritious food, they don't have the energy to reproduce in the wild, and this has been a problem with pandas. So they have captured them, and they have, they're trying to reproduce masses of pandas in captivity. Of course, if they can only do it 3 days a year. They can only get pregnant 3 days a year. So this is a really, really serious problem as far as the panda is concerned. Stage 1 of reproductive behavior. In most species, sexual attraction cannot take place until the female is ready to reproduce. If that were the way it was with humans, we would women would go into, they would start ovulating at a select point during the month, and that would be the only time that they would ever want to have sex. Other animals, of course, that's actually how they do things. Humans, of course, humans and most of the great apes can have sex at any time, and they will. This can be judged by whether males approach her and how rapidly they approach her. A dog, when the dog comes into heat, or a cat comes into heat, that's the only time that the cat can actually have intercourse, or the dog, whichever, or the cow, or the mule, or whatever. Well, not mule, mules don't reproduce. The female will show attraction to the male by whether she allows him to approach her or not. If you've ever watched this in nature, a dog, for example, if you've ever had a female dog, if she isn't ready to reproduce, then she will chase the male dogs away. They'll try to mount her, and she will chase them away. In many mammalian species, the female will demonstrate her approachability through swelling in the vaginal area that is a different color, and an odor regulated by a surge of estrogen. And of course, this surge of estrogen will cause pheromones to be produced. When she goes into heat, every male dog in the neighborhood knows that she's ready to go, that she's ready to reproduce. She will go into heat. She'll start putting off pheromones a couple days before she actually does go into heat. In most species, intercourse is not possible without full female cooperation, and we're going to see why in just a second. There's no such thing as raping a male dog raping a female dog. It just doesn't work, because she will not put herself in a position where he is able to penetrate her vagina with his penis. She won't put herself in that position. In order for her to be in that position, in order for her to reproduce or even to have intercourse, she has to get into the right position. And let me show you what that position is in most cases. This is known as lordosis, where she has to move her tail over, and she has to stick her butt up in the air. She has to angle her butt up so that the vagina is straight, so that the male can penetrate. So she has to lay her front end down and her back end up. She has to stick her back end up in order for a male to penetrate. Otherwise, if she's just standing there, then her vagina is angled upwards, and he's sticking in downwards, and it's just not going to work. The angle is incorrect, and it won't happen. It will not happen. If during intercourse she stands up, then he will get stuck, and he won't be able to pull. He won't be able to get pull out. You probably have seen that if you've ever watched dogs mate.
It's a little dog.
Yeah, it happens. You have to throw. Well,
I don't know.
the male dog is crying, just crying because he's having his penis pulled off. I'm laughing, and it's not funny at all. Appetiting behavior, behavior that establishes, maintains, or promotes sexual behavior. When a female is displaying this behavior, this is stage 2. She may approach a male, she may stay close to the male, she may show alternating approach and retreat behavior. She may move in a specific manner that will result in the male mounting the female. And this is stage 2. This is the proceptive behavior. This is known as proceptive behavior. She's ready to reproduce. She wants to reproduce. She's trying to inform the male that she is ready to have intercourse. Male appetiting behavior may consist of staying near and sniffing the female. This kind of stuff happens all the time. So stage 1 is sexual attraction takes place. Stage 2 is getting ready to have intercourse. Stage 3 is when they actually are in the act of intercourse. It's known as copulation or coitus. Copulation begins when the male puts his penis in the female's vagina, an act known as intromission. Through rhythmic movements, the male will then squirt sperm-filled semen into the female's reproductive tract. In most animals, this doesn't take very long at all, whereas humans may have sex for an extended length of time. This does not happen with dogs or cats. They will usually enter her and they will ejaculate as rapidly as they possibly can. The quicker that they can ejaculate, the more likely that they are going to be the parent of the offspring. After copulation, the two will go through a period when they will not be able to re-engage in intercourse. This is known as a refractory phase. He cannot do it again, not to her anyway. However, if a novel female comes around, a female that is not the one that he just had intercourse with, then he can have intercourse with that animal. And this is known as the Coolidge effect. I'll explain it to you in a minute. When a female is ready to copulate, she will be sexually receptive. Okay. I was in Frankfurt, and like an idiot, and where were we headed? Berlin. We were headed to Berlin, and we had a 3-hour layover in. We're riding the train, the troop train. We picked up the troop train in Frankfurt. So we had a 3-hour layover in Frankfurt. So most of the guys went to the sex shows. I don't know if you've ever been to Germany. Well, you have. You've been to lunch. They didn't let you out. Anyway, they have the sex shows where you pay 10 marks and you get to sit there and watch somebody else have sex, which never made any sense to me. So being an idiot that I am, I went to the zoo. I decided I would go to the Frankfurt Zoo, which it's a nice zoo. It's a pretty nice zoo. Just so happened that it was monkey breeding season. So there was, I know. So I went around the monkey cages and it was a mandrill. It was a male mandrill, and this guy's walking around with an erect penis. He's just kind of walking around with his penis hanging out, which normally you don't see that kind of thing. And he's just walking around with it, and he's erect. And so he stands up, and there's a female walks past him, and he kind of slaps her on the fanny, grabs a hold of her, he sticks her vaginal area around his penis, pumps her a couple times, and throws her up. And then he walks around a little bit more, and then another female, not the same one of course, walks past him, grabs a hold of her, smacks her on the fanny a couple times, grabs her, pumps her a couple times, and throws her up. And so this is going on. And he's the only male in the cage, and there's about 5 females, and so one by one he has intercourse with all 5 of the female mandrills. And then he started over again with the first one. And of course, by this time, they're starting to talk to each other. But as long as there was a novel female, he could reproduce with that female. That's what was going on here. And there were, actually there must have been about 7, but 2 of them were pretty small monkeys. Anyway, he didn't breed the smaller ones, he just bred the larger females. But the Germans just had a fit. They were just having a great time. They were calling people up on the telephone. Of course, this is before cell phones, and there was a telephone right beside the cage. So they're calling up their friends and telling them about all this stuff. And pretty soon there's like 150 people standing around watching this monkey have his way with those females. But the idea was that he could have intercourse with all of the 5 novel females, because he was having sex with a different one each time. This is the way it works with chickens, you know. And chickens, you'll have 20 or 30 hens, and then you'll have one rooster, and it's his job to make them lay eggs. So Calvin Coolidge and his wife were at a chicken farm in Iowa, and they were walking around, and they were watching this rooster, you know, jump on the back of the hen and have sex with him. And they were telling them, well, yeah, he can breed 100, 150 times a day. And Mrs. Coolidge, you know, nudged Calvin, and she said, he was the president of the United States at the time. She nudged him and said, did you hear that? He can have sex 100 to 150 times a day. And Calvin said, get me different females and I'll do it too.
Yeah.
And that's why they call it the Coolidge effect. And this got into the newspapers. Calvin Coolidge was one of those guys that never said anything. And when he told this kind of dirty joke, everybody took notice. Anyway, that's why they call it the Coolidge effect, because it has to do with novel females. So you can have, if you had 5 different females, potentially you could have sex with one of them, and then you could roll over and have sex with the second one, and then you could roll over and have sex with the third one, and then the fourth one and the fifth one, because they would be novel, that they would be different from the one you'd had intercourse with before. That's known as the Coolidge effect. Stage 4 is post-copulatory behavior. This is different in most species. The males of all mammals but primates achieve and maintain their erection with a bone in their penis known as the os penis. Os means bone. So if we're talking about a horse, we're talking about a rhinoceros, we're talking about a walrus, you're talking about an elk. They do not have erections like primates do. Their erection is actually a bone. So what they will do is they will, when it's time for them to have intercourse, the bone is normally lodged in their abdomen. The bone will come out and it will go into the penis, and then they can have intercourse. Sometimes, as with dogs, the male is unable to remove themselves from the copulatory position for minutes after ejaculation, and this is kind of a problem. This can be a problem, but it's also a reproductive technique. If there is a dog that's mounted on another dog and he can't move for a number of minutes, then potentially he will be the father of the offspring. Once upon a time I had a girlfriend, and she had a Cocker Spaniel, a female Cocker Spaniel. And the Cocker Spaniel was kind of, went into heat. And there were a bunch of dogs in the neighborhood. They all took turns with her. She gave birth to 4 different types of puppies. 4 different breeds of puppies. As weird as that sounds. Hey, Colty.
Hey.
Anyway, we're talking about reproduction.
Oh, nice.
The whole purpose of copulation is the joining of the male and the female gametes, the ova in the female, of course, and the sperm in the male. If the two join, the ova will become fertilized and the union will become a zygote. While all mammals, birds, and most reptiles fertilize inside the body, internal fertilization, fish and frogs fertilize outside the body, external fertilization. So frogs and fish, the female will ovulate and she will eject the eggs, and then the male will drop sperm on the eggs. So there's no actual penetration as far as fish and frogs are concerned. They just have to be in the same vicinity at the same time. And normally the same vicinity in this case, but especially with frogs, the male is usually on the back of the female frog. She will drop her eggs, and then he will spew out semen and fertilize the eggs. The masses of eggs. And that's usually the way it works with fish as well. If the species lays eggs outside the body as birds and reptiles do, it is called oviparity. This is known as egg birth. Humans, of course, don't do that. If the species allows the zygote to develop in the female's body, it is referred to as viviparity, and this is live birth. That's the way we do it, that's the way dogs do it, that's the way cows do it. We have viviparity. Oviparity, egg birth, viviparity, live birth. For most creatures, there's only one sexual position they can be in for copulation to be possible. Since most mammals walk on all fours and have a tail, reproduction can only take place if the female raises her rump and moves her tail to the side. This will usually straighten her vagina adequately for penetration. If she doesn't do this, then penetration is impossible. She has to be in the right position in order for that to happen. This is known as lordosis, and this is the way cats do it, this is the way dogs do it, it's the way, well, actually, ungulates don't do it this way. Cows and deer and whatnot, they don't really do it this way. But any flexible animal like wolverines, for example. Wolverines are really kind of interesting creatures. They have territories. And if some other animal or another wolverine comes into their territory, they will kill it unless they are in estrus, unless they are ready to reproduce. At that point, then the female will allow the male into her territory. They will have intercourse, and then she'll chase him away because wolverines are very territorial. As soon as she has the pups, she'll raise the pups to a certain point, and then after that, the pups will, she'll chase the pups away. And if they ever come into her territory, she'll kill them, as stupid as that sounds. So wolverines don't spend a whole lot of time with other wolverines. As much fun as that is. For frogs to mate successfully, the male must mount the female. As in this picture, you can see the male is holding on to the female. He's holding on to the back of her. There's no penetration, but as the female emits her unfertilized eggs, the male must release his semen, and it must be relatively coordinated. If this does not take place in or over water, reproduction will not take place. They have to drop their fertilized eggs into the water, or the eggs will die. This position is known as amplexus. So with cats and dogs, we have lordosis, and with frogs and fish don't do it this way, but frogs, this is known as amplexus, where he's holding onto the back of her, and as she emits her eggs, he will ejaculate his semen. While the sexual response is extremely complex, the female anatomy for intercourse is relatively simple, as strange as that may seem. Two folds of skin cover and protect the vaginal opening. These are the labia majora and the labia minora. The female erectile tissue is the clitoris above the vaginal opening, and that's about it. There's not much more to what's going on as far as the female is concerned. The labia, of course, are to protect the vaginal area. The vaginal area is extremely acid, as weird as that may seem, and the reason it's acid is to protect the female from infection. Bacteria, it's very difficult for bacteria to get in because of the labia majora and labia minora, but it's also almost impossible for the bacteria to survive in such an acidic environment. So as humans have evolved, the female has evolved with a very acidic vaginal reproductive area. Let's call it a reproductive area. So in order for the male to reproduce with the male must produce a alkaline semen. So semen is very alkaline, whereas the female reproductive area is very acidic. And this gets really kind of interesting because as she starts to ovulate, acidity of her reproductive area will neutralize. It will become less acidic. If a male has intercourse with a female and when she's not ovulating, then the semen will pretty much die relatively quickly because of the acidity of her reproductive area. But as she begins to ovulate, the acidity of her reproductive area will become less and less acidic, making it more likely that the semen will actually survive. Or the sperm will actually survive. So as you can see, it's relatively simple, the labia majora, the labia minora, and the clitoris. Now, in some areas of the world, they circumcise females. And depending on where it is and who's doing it and what their ideas are, sometimes they'll cut away the labia minora, sometimes they'll cut away the labia majora, and in some extreme cases, they'll cut away the clitoris, as weird as that sounds. But
they sew it up.
Yeah,
Leave a little opening.
Yeah, just leave a tiny little opening. The idea is, in some areas, that the female is a wanton creature. Females are more sexual than males are. That's the idea. So in order to control the female sexuality, they circumcise the female. As weird as that sounds. And as far as Western man is concerned, women are less sexual than females are less sexual than the male is. But in some cultures, the female is the wanton creature. As weird as that sounds. Since male delivery of the gamete requires penetration, the male system is more complex than that of the female. And that was it. I mean, if you want to reproduce with a female, there's not much to it. You ejaculate into the vagina, and then and that's it. I mean, then you go up. The sperm will swim up into the uterus, and it will go to the fallopian tubes, and the reproduction will take place. That's about it. But as far as the male is concerned, he's got tons of different structures that allow him to reproduce. And this is because we needed to add an alkaline substrate for his sperm. So all of these different structures in the male reproductive area, if all these structures have to function properly for him to be able to reproduce. Since male delivery of the gamete requires penetration, the male system is far more complex. Erection takes place due to an engorgement of blood. As we said before, most other animals, other than the great apes, other than primates, will have an os penis. So it's very easy for them to have an erection. Not so much with male humans. Semen is produced in the testes and stored in the epididymis. During ejaculation, the sperm will travel up the vas deferens, past the seminal vesicle, the prostate gland, and the Cowper's gland, where it picks up a viscous alkaline fluid called semen. So it has to pass through all of these three different areas, and each of those areas have to produce an adequate amount of semen in order for him to have an alkaline substrate for the sperm to be floating around in. It's very necessary that the substrate be alkaline because it has to neutralize the acidic female reproductive area. Okay, so we have the vas deferens going past the seminal vesicle, the prostate gland, and the Cowper's gland, and this is one of the reasons why the prostate gland is so important. The prostate gland produces an alkaline substrate. If the prostate gland is not functioning properly, it causes all kinds of interesting problems. Lots and lots of people have died from prostate cancer, from prostatitis, and it's because the prostate gland is a very delicate structure. It's a strangely delicate structure. So, if the male doesn't have sex, if the fluid in and the prostate gland needs to be changed from time to time. It needs to be moved out of there. Otherwise, we've got a problem. If the individual has ever come in contact with a venereal disease, with a sexually transmitted infection, then potentially it will block this area. It won't allow the prostate gland to empty completely. And if that's the case, then the individual will probably develop prostatitis. I had a friend that when he was in Vietnam, what an idiot. He kept going to the same prostitute, and that prostitute had gonorrhea. And so he kept getting gonorrhea. It didn't happen one time, it happened 4 times. I know, he's so stupid. He came back. He wasn't worried about it. You know, he was 18 and stupid. So he bragged about it. He bragged about having gonorrhea 4 times.
Yes.
And then he came back, when he came back to the States, he met a woman and he married her and decided he wanted to, they wanted children. So he kept trying, but he couldn't impregnate her. And the problem was that he had a blockage in his vas deferens from the gonorrhea. Gonorrhea scars your reproductive tract, and that's what happened with him. So he wasn't able to produce the right kind of semen in order to impregnate his wife, and they never did have children. As sad as that is, because
sad.
well.
She wanted a baby, but it was all.
Anyway, she already had a kid. Okay. She's also about 4'5". She was just tiny, a tiny, and he was tall. He was like 6'4", 6'5". It was so. The two of them should never have gotten together. They just didn't fit at all. They both had blonde hair, though. That was interesting. But his problem was that he'd contracted gonorrhea all those times, and it had scarred his reproductive tract. The other problem is that, especially in the military, if you contract a sexually transmitted infection, then they will tell you to stop doing that. They'll tell you to stop. So you can get into trouble if you contract it more than once.
Article 15?
You can get an Article 15, yeah. Destruction of military property. Oh, you think I'm kidding?
No, it's a real thing.
It is.
Actually, I mean, I'm not sure it was anymore, but it was, you could only have sex missionary. It was actually in, I think it was in the, not a.
It's in the UCMJ. Sodomy is against military regulations. So you can only have genital sex. As weird as that sounds.
Yeah,
It's right there in the UCMJ. So you have to have sex in a only genital sex. As weird as that sounds. So this is kind of,
they'll send you the freaking 11 word, man.
they will. Yeah, well, it's not that bad.
But
Usually, they'll
some of
keep
the laws are like kind of dumb, like really.
Yeah, well, they'll take stripes away from you. They rarely send you to jail unless you've done something else. Usually, when they, if you're caught with somebody else's wife and you're married, that's adultery, of course. That's against UCMJ as well. But they'll usually charge you with all kinds of interesting things, like fornication. They'll charge you with sodomy.
One little thing would bring up like 8 charges.
Yeah, it's weird. My wife kept getting involved in these kinds of cases because she was a lower ranking, or not a lower ranking, but a lower level lieutenant colonel and major. So she kept getting involved with these.
Well, sometimes they'll just boot you out. They
Yeah.
really want to do it. Just do it back.
Why mess around? You're just going to do it again, and then they're going to have to get mad at you again. Anyway, so we got all of these really intricate parts inside you, inside the male that demand attention. If you've got a blockage in any of these glands, then your semen's not going to be alkaline enough for you to be able to reproduce. I had a friend who was, and it was just his girlfriend. I never could quite figure out why the doctor was so worried about this man being able to reproduce, but he wasn't even married, and here he was. He used to bring a semen specimen into the lab every week to see if it was alkaline enough, as weird as that is, because he had a blockage in one of his glands. Eventually, it was a mucal plug. Eventually, it unplugged and he was okay, but we had to check him every week. It was just stupid. Normally, the male is not erect because cells in the glands of the penis, the paragigantocellular nucleus, send serotonergic fibers down the spinal cord that inhibit erections. Otherwise, we'd be walking around with erections all the time. During sexual excitation, the forebrain inhibits the PGN and allows the penis to become erect. SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, increase serotonin in the brain and may not allow the inhibition of the PGN. And this is one of the reasons why if somebody is taking an antidepressant, if a male is taking an antidepressant, a lot of times he cannot get an erection, as weird as that may seem. Okay, so why does Viagra work? Viagra works because it blocks the paragigantocellular nucleus. It blocks that. It blocks it for as long as that chemical is in your system. Chemicals stay in your system for, I don't know, 4 to 6 hours. Or about 4 hours, I guess. So you've got about 4 hours to have intercourse after you take a Viagra. That's the way she works. Well, there is no normal or typical when it comes to sexual response. Too many social and psychological factors. Women achieve vaginal lubrication during the excitement phase. Males have a smaller amount of lubricating exudate during erection to ease penetration, and the lubrication, of course, allows them to have intercourse. Otherwise, if you rub two body parts together, you get a lot of friction. As long as there's lubrication, we have no problem. Males typically have one basic pattern of response, but they do pass through a refractory phase after orgasm when erection is difficult. So males, it's pretty much it's a one-note samba as far as the male is concerned. He becomes excited. He will plateau at a certain point, and then of course he will orgasm, and that's it. That's all there is to it. Females, however, rarely have a refractory phase. Thus, multiple orgasm is possible as far as females are concerned, but they have 3 typical patterns of response. And these are the 3 typical patterns. As you can see, excitation, and then plateau, and then orgasm, and then resolution. They can have a different, these are not really orgasms, but these are reactions to stimulation. And then the orgasm will be more prolonged. And then they have a response that is goes along the plateau where they do not orgasm. Anyway, so the females have a lot more varied response to sexual intercourse than males do. Males, it's just pretty much one type of response. Females, it can be a lot of different things. In many situations in nature, the males and the females of the species are very much different in size as well as structure, and we saw that with the frogs. Yeah, you can see the male frog and the female frog are very much different. Female frog is much larger. If we look at praying mantises, if we look at black widow spiders, the female black widow spider is much larger than the male. In most vertebrates, the male is larger because he must battle other males for the right to reproduce. So if we look at female dogs and male dogs, the male is usually much larger than the female. If we look at raccoons, it's the same way. We look at wolverines, the male wolverine is pretty big. We look at bears, the male bear is much larger than the female bear. That's just the way it is in most vertebrates. The male is much larger because the male has to battle other males for the right to reproduce. It's the same way with gorillas. If you've ever been around gorillas, the male gorilla is much larger than the female gorilla. Most human males are bigger than most human females. That's the way it works. Not always, this isn't always the case, but for the most part, males are larger than females. In my case, I've never been married to anybody taller than me. But there's a lot of females out there that are taller than me. Another definition of sexual dimorphism is the male gamete is abundant, small, and cheap, while the female gamete is large, rare, and expensive. Females equal babies, males equal nothing. We equal nothing. We are expendable. One male can reproduce with hundreds of females. So you don't need an equal number of males to females. Each female does represent a baby though. However, and we need to stop right now. As much fun as this is, I won't tell any more dirty stories. I'll try not to. I'll try to control myself.